today's video, I'm going to be showing you a extreme 3D Minions and Gru. And I've done a bunch of different Minion videos in the past, so if you are a Minion fan, definitely check those out. But I know Miss Melody and I, and as much of my family as I can think of, are really excited about this new movie coming out, Minions 2, which comes out today. And I don't know, I don't think we're going to go to it in the theaters, but we are definitely going to have to find it somewhere as soon as it comes out, don't you think? Yeah, because we're really excited. I hope you guys love this as much as we do, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well. Bye!
So we're going to begin with an overlay of Milky White Acrylic, which is one of my absolute favorites. And I know that Milky White Acrylic is used a lot in doing like a baby boomer or a French ombre style, but it's such a pretty background color for things. I absolutely love it. It's not quite as harsh as a bright white acrylic, and it just gives it this really smooth, beautiful background. So now that we have that pretty much applied over the whole nail, you're going to take your e-file and file it into shape. This nail is quite long, so I would highly recommend using an e-file if you have one or if you like to use them, but a hand file would definitely do it as well. And now after we have that done, I'm going to sculpt my two minions that will be in kind of the background more with yellow acrylic, and just start. And anytime I create a bigger, more of a scene than just a single character or a single character's face, I do make things kind of separately and then assemble them later, and you'll see what I mean in a second. But you don't have to really worry about the placement of these as much, even though I am pretty much sculpting them in the angles that they will be in the end. It's not as critical. So you could even make these on two separate nail form backings. They don't have to be near each other at all. So you just, don't worry about it if they don't, if they're too far away or they're too close together. It does not matter at all. But now using a medium blue acrylic, I'm going to be adding what's going to end up showing of their little overalls. And since they're kind of tucked behind Gru, you don't really have to worry about doing their whole bodies. Like, I'm not going to sculpt their legs or their feet. I'm just going to do kind of like their body portion, knowing that even some of this is going to get covered up in the end. So just do little bit by little bit. I do like working on both of them at the same time, and in fact, if I had really been thinking about it, I most likely would have done all three minions that I sculpted all at the same time, just because it kind of creates a little assembly line type of a style of working, and I personally love that, working kind of like doing a whole bunch of stuff all at the same time. And I think it just makes things go a little quicker. And then that way too, you don't forget how you did anything because you just had done it. So for instance, like with making their body sizes, you can't think, oh man, how much acrylic did I use to sculpt their bodies? Is this new one that I'm sculpting going to be too big? Because you just did it. So you can kind of monitor yourself and keep track of how you're doing everything as you go along. And it just can sometimes make things a little bit easier. Then again, some people like to, finish one all the way through and then start the next one. And whatever works for you is fantastic. And really, I'd recommend trying both with your work and just see what you prefer. So now that I have their blue done, I'm going to sculpt their goggles with silver. And as you're trying to find minions to sculpt, you see there are so many different varieties with them, even the size of their goggles. I know Bob specifically, which I did sculpt a Bob later, but he has a much bigger goggle than the rest. His eye is actually considerably larger than the other minions. So you can kind of have some fun with it and play around with it and do things however you like. To sculpt their actual goggle frame, I did use a dotting tool to press in the center of the silver acrylic to give it that hole in the middle. Before you do that, though, you do need to dip all of your tools, if you're going to use them in that way, in some acrylic powder to prevent sticking. So I just take and I dip my dotting tool into the silver acrylic that I was using for the goggle, and then you can press it in. And then as soon as you take it out before you go to do the next one, you may need to dip it again or you may not. It'll just depend on your particular acrylic. So it's just probably a safe bet to dip it again just to make sure. And then after you do the one goggle, then you're going to do, or the goggle strap, then you're going to do the other side of the goggles. So you're going to do the black strap on that. Make sure that you're kind of cautious when you're doing that because the black acrylic will stain the yellow. So just, don't try to lay down too much or make your acrylic too wet. You want it to be a nice, even, consistent bead, which I know can be easier said than done. But if there's ever a time to really try for it, it's with black acrylic on top of yellow. And then after you have that done, I'm going to add their arms. As you can see, I'm kind of jumping around in the spaces of the minion. Like, instead of sculpting the arms right after I did their overalls, I'm going to let their overalls set up for a moment, and then I'll come back to them to sculpt their arms, just so that blue acrylic had a chance to set up before I do something right next to it. That's generally kind of the way I like to do things, just so that I don't have a chance of ruining something that I just finished if it was still a little too wet. And then one of my minions, I'm going to have him with his arm in the air and then eventually I'll sculpt his little glove on his hand. But the other hands, the other 3 hands that are on these 2 minions, I'm going to leave handless because it'll get covered up anyway. And then fill in their goggles with some white. So you can just set a bead of white acrylic right in the middle. It'll fill in that hole that you made, and you don't have to do anything else to it. And then add a little more silver to add the little connection on the side from the goggle frame to the goggle strap. Press that in a little bit. The silver acrylic I'm using is a very foil looking silver, so it's got like little glitter particles in it, very fine little glitter particles, and so it does tend to leave a glitter smudge wherever it goes. But now once I have those 2 done, I'm going to start working on Gru. And I really shouldn't have sculpted him so close to my minions. Like I said, you don't really have to sculpt these close to each other, and nothing has to be done right next to each other because I'll glue it all later. But just, apparently I decided to try to make everything as close as possible. I don't know. It looks better for filming maybe. But we're going to start with Gru's shirt. And he's really pretty big, especially his shoulders and his body compared to the minions. And so just kind of keep that in mind. And one benefit of having things sculpted close to each other is that you can look back and forth between what you finished and what you're working on to try to get the sizing and proportions accurate. But otherwise, if that's not a super big concern for you, I would space these things out a little bit more than I did. So we're going to finish off Gru's shirt, and I want his shirt, the bottom of his shirt or sweatshirt or whatever you want to call this thing, to really rest at the bottom of the nail. So I'm not going to go any further. I'm not going to sculpt his legs or anything else. So I'm just going to finish it off. Got his one arm there that's hanging down straight. And then his other arm I'm going to leave because that one is going to be holding up our bob once we get to sculpt our bob, which I believe I'll be doing now. But we're just going to leave that one kind of as it is, just stopping it right below the shoulder because we'll add the arm later. So now for our little bob, I'm just going to start out by sculpting his body. His bobby is what I was going to say. No, his body. And then work on Gru for a second more, and then I'll go back to bob periodically throughout the sculpting of Gru, just so that I have a chance to let everything set up and I can work on these 2 just like how I worked on the other 2 minions, and let everything kind of have a chance to cure as I'm working on the other little project I have going. So I'm going to add the collar of Gru's shirt with more black, and then I'm going to fill in the zipper with silver. And this is really where you'll see how I was saying that it has like a foil effect and it'll leave a silver smudge everywhere it goes. But I'll paint over that with black acrylic paint later. So now back to our little bob. We're going to be adding his overalls just like we did the first 2. When you're doing him though, because his whole body will be seen, we do have to add his little legs as well. So there's the one leg and there's the other leg, pant leg, and then leave that for just a second. We'll add his shoes in a moment, and we're actually going to just finish these off the rest of the way with everything that's blue, doing the straps of the overalls and then the little pocket that's going to go in the front portion. And then after you have that done, you can sculpt his goggles. Like I said, remember his goggles just seem to be considerably larger. They take up more of his face than some of the other minions, and then he has less of a goggle strap on the side because of that too, because his eyes are just big. He's kind of like the baby, and he just has those big eyes. Then we're going to add his shoes on the bottom of his feet, and then fill in his goggles with the white. And just keep working back and forth a little bit. Before I add his arms, I am going to be sculpting his teddy bear. So I don't know if anybody watched the first Minions movie, not the first Despicable Me movie, but the Minion movie. Bob had a little teddy bear that he carried around everywhere and was his security friend. And so we're going to definitely have to include that. Got his ears on the little friend, and then his hand. So the little bit of black, his bear is brown, so you don't see that black hand too much, at least on video, but he does have his little black hand that's holding onto that teddy bear. And then we have our other minion up above who needs a hand as well, so we're going to sculpt that with black acrylic since we have it out anyways, and add that hand in place, and then we can go back to Gru. So we're going to add Gru's head with a light nude color, and then after we have his head, we're going to be sculpting his nose separately so that it really sticks out, because his nose has like a wonderful hook shape to it, and we definitely want to include that. So as you're sculpting his head, I tried to get some height on his forehead too, and like the top of his head, his brow sticks out quite a ways. And so I was trying to kind of bring that out and kind of sculpt that out. I'm going to add a little bit more to his neck area, and then just keep adding little details to Gru along the way. And then, like I said, we're going to sculpt his nose separately. So next to him on the nail form backing with that same color that you used for his head, you're going to sculpt his little carrot-shaped nose. I'm going to add a little bit more, trying to really give him that sharp, really intense brow, just like so. And definitely look at plenty of reference photos when you're sculpting something like this. I think I ended up using 4 reference photos in order to sculpt my Gru with my minions. And there's some people have like this impression that using a reference photo is somehow makes your art less your own, and I don't think that's the case, especially if you have an image in your mind and you're using your reference photos to help guide you to the right place. It's not an issue. I don't think that's a problem at all. This is more, I guess, in the fine art world, but there's some people that think that using a reference photo just kind of lessens the quality of art. And I suppose, everything is a personal opinion. I don't feel that way at all. I advocate for reference photos all the time, and high quality ones at that. And so if you've ever felt like you shouldn't use a reference photo for one reason or another, or even as a nail tech, if a client comes in and says, I don't know what I want on my nails, you can do whatever you want, and you don't feel like you can quickly look up a reference photo just to kind of get you in the right direction, go for it. Do it. In fact, you don't have to look up a reference photo in that circumstance that's nail related. You could just look up summer patterns, or one thing I really like to do when I'm looking for just kind of random nail art inspiration is I look up, if you Google for backgrounds like phone screen, the home screen backgrounds, there's a whole bunch of ones that are just made, and you can get some really cool inspiration from them because there's all sorts of ones that are just sort of fun. So that's something that I like to do. Really sidetracked. Back to our little nail design. We're going to start gluing everybody together. So we're going to glue Bob right kind of over that shoulder on our Gru in the first place, and then after you have him glued in place, then you can add the rest of his arm and his hand that's holding on to Bob, since he's kind of giving him a one-armed hug like he's a toddler that he has to kind of keep track of. So we got his hand, and then we can also glue Gru's nose in place. What I like to do when I'm gluing little bits on is I put some nail glue on my nail form backing, and then I dip the piece that I want to glue down into the nail glue instead of brushing nail glue on to what I've been sculpting, because you can control the amount of nail glue you're getting much more that way than if you try to do kind of a dipping process or a brushing the nail glue on, or if you have a little squeeze bottle of nail glue. Definitely recommend putting the nail glue on something else and then going and dipping into it instead. Then after you have that nose done, you are going to need to bulk it out a little bit with some more of that light nude color, just adding some more shape to it on either side to make sure that it isn't so skinny. We want him to have a nice big nose. There's some things about Gru that I think the actual design process for were just so ingenious. His general shape and just his demeanor, he's like 50% soft guy and then 50% bad villain, and you can even just see it in the way that he's designed, because his head and that shape is all like the actual head shape are all very soft, and that in cartooning, when you're drawing a cartoon, soft shapes are for your nice characters and really sharp angular shapes are for your villains, and he has both. He has this wonderful mixture of both, and I think it just really helps show that he's a softie with a villain hobby, you could say. So we're going to just keep adding some more acrylic to his arm and kind of pointing that elbow out a little bit. And then you also need to then sculpt Bob's second arm, because he's got the one arm that's holding on to his little friend, and then his other arm is going to be resting on top of Gru's arm, because they are all intertwined and they're holding each other. So we're going to take yellow acrylic and just add that arm. The yellow acrylic probably won't show up as well as it would have if it weren't on top of the black, but it can be seen. And then once you have that done, you can glue your other two minions behind Gru a little bit. When you're gluing them down, there will probably be some gaps here and there where the acrylic doesn't line up, since it isn't two completely flat pieces, and that's just fine. After you have that, you can always fill in any of those gaps to add some strength with clear acrylic. I'm going to then glue my little minion and Gru pile onto the nail, and then after I have that done, I'm going to fill in behind them, like I said, with some clear acrylic. Just as far as everything, just go around and fill them in. And then I guess I also forgot to sculpt in Gru's other hand, and I wanted to add a little bit more to his nose, so we're going to do that too. I don't know how I forgot the one hand and just completely spaced that. So we're going to be adding his hand, and you can just hold a nail form backing up behind his arm to do that. It would probably have just been easier to do it before I put it to this point, but there's no problem going back through and fixing things either. It's something that everybody has to go back through. And you see there's this kind of Instagram mentality of people that see perfection every single day when they're scrolling through their Instagram feed, and these photos that are flawless, whether they be just people or nails or sunsets or whatever you're looking at, they're beautiful. They're beautiful images. And a lot of times you don't see the process of how somebody landed at that. And when you're looking at an image of nail art and you're thinking, oh my goodness, it's so perfect. There is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into creating these perfect images that you see. And it's not just, creating the image and like editing. There's certainly a lot of editing that goes on in a lot of those photos, but it's also the progress and the time that somebody did. And you don't know how many times they restarted because something was off. And so if you try to compare yourself to those images, just be a little bit easier on yourself, because you don't know how many times somebody restarted, and chances are it would surprise you with how many, oops, I have to redo that sort of scenarios happen. So now that we have all of our acrylic done, I'm going to add some of the finer details with acrylic paint. I'm going to start out by giving everybody their irises. So I've got brown irises in my minions up above, and then Bob has one brown and one green iris. And then after you have that done, you can add their eyelids on the minions if they have them, if that was part of their smile, if they have it. But the expression in their eyes you can really adjust with their eyelids, and then add their mouths. Don't go straight in for black paint as far as like their mouths, especially the one minion I have that has sort of a grumpy look on his face. Just do a brown outline for his lips instead of going straight to black. It makes everything just look a little softer and a little less cartoony, but just a little bit, more relaxed. And then do some brown outlines here and there on Gru where needed. Give him his eyebrows, which really should have been a darker brown, so I'll fix that later. But we're just going to go through and do any cleaning up you want to do on his jacket from the gray scarf and the silver zipper can be done with acrylic paint. And then add the black stripes on his gray scarf, going all the way up the whole scarf, and then going around his face too. The whole thing with Gru, and like I said, with the contrasting colors and his whole like villain versus nice guy kind of a mix, is really even plays into like his scarf. It's black and gray, which you would think would be villain colors, but it's got this whimsical stripy pattern. I have always been really impressed with how he is portrayed. So then we're going to go through and just do a little bit of outlining on our minions. Their overalls, use a dark blue paint for that. I wouldn't go like straight to a dark black color, or even like a different color like a brown. That darker blue shade really does show off their coloring nicely for their overalls. It makes the lighter blue color just look a little bit more vibrant. We're also going to go through and do some outlines around our minions' eyes and their eyelids, and give them their pupil, and around their goggles with a black. And for that, actually do use some black for that. And do all of the minions. Don't give Bob any kind of an eyelid. He's got these really big open eyes. You're also going to need to add Gru's pupils inside his eyes, and then with a darker shade of brown. So I just mixed the brown I used before with some black using my thumb, which is my favorite little palette. I'm going to darken up his eyebrows a little bit, and then give him a couple final little outlines here and there where needed. And just, keep monitoring what you're working on just to see if there's anything that's needed. I'm also going to give all of my minions and Gru a bright white highlight in each eye, just to kind of brighten those up, and it adds so much realism in just a little quick step. And keep adding anything. I'm going to give the minion with the open mouth a little bit of a tongue and some teeth. And as you're just looking at them, you'll keep seeing little things that you might want to add. And to finish this set off, I'm going to be doing the details on my bear's face, button eyes, and a nose. And then we're going to go through and apply some gel sealer over that milky white background, and some matte top coat over Gru and our minions. And this one is done. I absolutely love this nail. Like I said, we are super excited to see this new Minion movie that has been, originally they said it was going to come out in 2020, and then it got postponed, like most movies that were coming out. So I'm sure eventually we'll get to see it. We've been waiting a while. So I hope you guys love this design as much as I do, and don't forget to click subscribe to see all my future videos as well. Bye!